It started like any other ordinary afternoon. The sun was shining bright, and the city streets were filled with people rushing home, children laughing, and cars moving in every direction. For one food delivery driver, it was just another day on the road. He had already made a few deliveries that morning, and now he was heading toward another customer. His car wasn't fancy, but it was enough to keep him going. He had dreams, like everyone else, but for now, his focus was simple: earn a living, take care of his family, and try to make each day better than the last. He followed the map on his phone, driving down familiar streets he had been through many times before. The job wasn't easy, sometimes long hours, sometimes tough customers, but he always reminded himself that there was dignity in honest work. Every meal he carried meant someone was waiting, someone hungry, and he was the bridge to deliver it. It wasn't heroic work, but it was real, and it mattered. As he turned into a quiet neighborhood, the atmosphere felt calm. Kids were walking home from school, holding their backpacks and chatting with each other. Some were racing on bicycles, while others were just strolling slowly. Life looked peaceful, the kind of everyday scene people hardly notice because it feels so normal. The driver slowed down as he checked the house number for the delivery. He parked his car along the side of the street, turned off the engine, and reached for the food bag sitting in the passenger seat. He didn't know that within minutes, this very ordinary delivery would change into the most unforgettable moment of his life. While he stepped out of the car, adjusting the bag in his hand, he noticed a young boy a little further down the road. The boy looked no older than 10 or 11, walking home with his school bag swinging at his side. He had that carefree look children often have, the kind that makes you believe the world is a safe place. The boy wasn't in a hurry. He walked slowly, maybe enjoying the warm breeze or just lost in his own thoughts after a long school day. The driver smiled for a moment. He had children of his own at home, so seeing a kid on the street often made him think of them. Little did he know that the next few minutes would test his courage in a way he had never imagined. It all happened so suddenly. The quietness of the street began to shift. At first, there was a strange noise in the distance, something sharp, something that made the air feel heavy. The driver's eyes immediately lifted in confusion. People around him began to react too, though at that moment, it wasn't clear what was happening. Some adults walking on the other side of the road froze, their eyes wide, as if they had just seen something frightening. The driver didn't understand right away, but he felt the change in the air. A sense of panic, quick and unsettling, spread across the street. The young boy who had been walking home stopped in his tracks. His small body stiffened, his eyes looking around with fear. For a moment, it looked as though he didn't know which way to run, or if he should move at all. The driver's heart began to beat faster. He didn't have all the answers, and he wasn't sure what exactly was unfolding. But one thing was clear: the boy was in danger. Something about the situation was not right, and instincts took over. The driver could have looked the other way. He could have hidden behind his car like many others were beginning to do. But his attention stayed fixed on that child. Time seemed to slow down. The boy's face carried the kind of fear no child should ever feel. His small hands clutched the strap of his backpack, and his steps were frozen in place. The world around him felt too big, too loud, too sudden. The driver tightened his grip on the food bag, his mind racing. He wasn't a policeman, he wasn't a firefighter, he wasn't someone trained for emergencies. He was just a delivery driver trying to finish his shift. Yet, in that moment, none of those labels mattered. What mattered was the boy standing helpless in the middle of uncertainty. A voice inside told him, "You can't just stand here. You have to do something." His heart pounded harder, sweat forming on his forehead. But courage doesn't always come from strength. It often comes from love, from empathy, from the refusal to let an innocent life be lost. He looked at the boy again, and something inside him shifted. He couldn't leave him there. Not now. Not when it mattered most. And so, What began as an ordinary delivery suddenly turned into the beginning of an extraordinary story, one that no one in that neighborhood, and later across the nation, would ever forget. The calmness of the afternoon shattered in an instant. What had felt like a safe, ordinary street now carried a wave of confusion and panic. People who had been walking calmly moments before were suddenly looking around, their faces pale, their voices trembling. Some ducked behind cars, some ran toward nearby houses, and others simply froze, unsure of what to do. In the middle of this sudden storm of fear was the young boy. He stood still on the sidewalk, clutching his backpack strap so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His small body looked stiff, like he was rooted to the ground. His wide eyes darted from side to side, searching for comfort, but finding only chaos. The driver, still holding the food bag in one hand, felt his heart race faster. His body was caught between instinct and reason. One part of him wanted to find safety like everyone else, to hide until everything passed. But another part, stronger, louder, and impossible to ignore, was focused only on that boy. The world seemed to slow down. He could hear the quick footsteps of people running, the hurried shouts from parents calling for their children, the sound of doors slamming as neighbors rushed inside. Yet through all the noise, the boy's silence was the loudest thing of all. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood frozen, as if fear itself had taken control of him. The driver knew this was the most dangerous moment. A child in panic doesn't always know what to do. If the boy ran in the wrong direction, he could end up in even more danger. If he stayed frozen, he could be hurt simply because he didn't move. There was no time to wait, no time to think of what ifs. With every passing second, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The driver's breath quickened, and he felt sweat roll down his temple. He wasn't a hero, not in the way people imagine heroes to be. He didn't wear a uniform, he didn't carry a badge, and he had never trained for anything like this. But sometimes, being a hero isn't about preparation, it's about heart. He looked at the boy again. The child's shoulders trembled, his knees looked weak, and it was clear he was seconds away from breaking down completely. The driver knew he couldn't let that happen. In that moment, a decision formed inside him. He wouldn't stand back. He wouldn't watch fear consume a child. No matter what happened next, he would step in. The driver put down the food bag on the sidewalk without thinking twice. His hands were free now, his eyes locked on the boy. He took a deep breath, almost like he was filling himself with the courage he didn't know he had. And then he moved. Each step felt heavy, yet urgent. His legs pushed forward faster than his thoughts. The world around him blurred, the people hiding, the sound of chaos, the uncertainty of what was happening. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was reaching that child. As he got closer, the boy finally looked up at him. Their eyes met. The boy's face was pale, his lips trembling, his eyes filled with the kind of fear no child should ever have to experience. But in that same moment, there was also a flicker of hope. He saw someone coming for him. He saw he wasn't alone anymore. The driver bent slightly as he reached him, his voice calm but firm. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. Instead, he spoke softly, trying to cut through the storm of fear surrounding the boy. "It's okay. I've got you. You're safe with me." The boy's body shook, but he nodded ever so slightly, as if those words gave him a thread of strength to hold on to. The driver gently placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him. He could feel how tense the child was, how fast his small heart was beating. The driver didn't waste another second. With one motion, he guided the boy away from the open sidewalk and toward a safer spot behind a parked car. He crouched down with him, lowering their bodies. Using his own frame as a shield, the boy pressed against him, his breathing fast and shallow. But the driver whispered again, "Stay close to me. Don't be afraid. I won't let anything happen to you." In that small space of shelter, the world still roared with panic outside. But the boy's fear began to ease. Just a little. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't invisible. Someone cared enough to stand with him when everyone else was running away. For the driver, it didn't matter what happened to his delivery, his schedule, or even his safety. All that mattered was this moment. He knew deep in his heart that sometimes life puts you in places you don't expect, not because you're ready, but because you're needed. What began as an ordinary delivery had now transformed into a test of courage. And though he didn't know how it all end, one thing was clear: he would not let go of that child until the danger had passed. The boy clung tightly to the man's side, his little hands trembling as he tried to understand what was happening around him. The delivery driver could feel the child's heart racing against his arm, and for a moment, it was as if he could hear his silent cry for help without a single word being spoken. The world outside their hiding spot was still unsettled. People continued to shout, some rushing indoors while others pulled their children close. Cars that had been moving down the street just minutes earlier now stood abandoned, doors wide open, as their drivers had hurriedly escaped. It was chaos, the kind of chaos that makes time feel stretched, like every second is 10 times longer. But the driver didn't allow fear to control him. Inside, he was terrified too, but he knew he had to stay calm for the boy. Courage, he realized, isn't about not feeling afraid. It's about choosing to protect someone else, even when you are. He turned to the boy and spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "Look at me. You're not alone, okay? I'm here with you. Just hold on to me." The boy's teary eyes looked up, searching for reassurance, and the driver gave him a nod filled with certainty. That simple gesture gave the boy something to believe in, something solid to hold on to amid the fear. The driver glanced around quickly. He had to think fast. Staying out in the open was too risky, and he couldn't just wait for the situation to calm down on its own. He needed to move the child somewhere safer. His eyes scanned the street, looking for a better spot, maybe a porch, a fence, or somewhere closer to the houses. He knew that stepping out again would mean exposing himself. His mind whispered all the reasons not to do it. What if it's too dangerous? What if something goes wrong? But then his heart answered back, what if this boy were your own child? Wouldn't you want someone to step in? That thought was enough. He made up his mind. The driver leaned close to the boy and explained softly, "We're going to move, but you have to stay with me, no matter what. Hold my hand and don't let go. I'll make sure you're safe." The boy gave a shaky nod, and with that, the driver reached for his small hand. He squeezed it firmly, letting the boy feel strength and protection through that simple grip. Then, with a deep breath, he pulled the boy close to his side and stepped out from behind the car. Each step forward felt like a leap of faith. The street was still tense, but he kept his head steady, shielding the boy with his own body as they moved. Neighbors who peeked from behind their doors later said they couldn't believe what they were seeing: a delivery driver, still wearing his work jacket, holding a frightened child close, and guiding him to safety while everyone else was hiding. It was a picture of bravery that no one could forget. The boy stumbled once, his small legs struggling to keep up in the rush, but the driver immediately lifted him slightly by the arm and kept moving. His focus never wavered. He whispered encouragement with each step. "You're doing great. Almost there. Just a little more." Finally, they reached the side of a house where a tall fence offered more cover. The driver crouched down again, pulling the boy close as they leaned against the wooden boards. The boy clung to him, breathing hard, his face pressed against the man's shoulder. In that moment, something remarkable happened. The fear in the boy's eyes began to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of trust. He knew now that this man wasn't going to leave him. He wasn't going to run away. He wasn't going to let go. The driver felt it too. He hadn't set out that day expecting to be anyone's hero. He had simply wanted to finish his deliveries and go home to his own family. But life has a way of placing people exactly where they are needed most, even if they don't realize it at first. And so, crouched there behind the fence with a frightened child clinging to him, the driver made an unspoken promise. As long as you're with me, I will keep you safe. Minutes passed like hours, but through it all, the driver never loosened his grip on the boy's hand. His back ached from crouching, his legs burned from the rush, but he didn't let go. He whispered calm words, reassured him with gentle pats, and shielded him whenever he heard a sudden sound. It was a scene of quiet courage, a man and a boy, strangers just moments before, now bound together by an unbreakable moment of trust. The delivery bag still sat forgotten on the sidewalk where he had dropped it, but none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was the life beside him, the innocence he was protecting, and the promise he had silently made to stand firm, no matter what. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The storm outside hadn't ended yet, but he was ready to face whatever came next, because now it wasn't about him. It was about a child who needed someone brave enough to act. The minutes felt endless, but slowly, the sounds of chaos began to fade. The street, once filled with panic, was now growing quiet. People started peeking from windows, neighbors whispered to each other from behind closed doors, and the heavy cloud of fear that had hovered over everything seemed to lighten. Little by little, the driver kept his arm firmly around the boy, shielding him even as the silence returned. He didn't relax right away. His body was tense, his heart still racing, but his focus stayed on the small life pressed against him. The boy's breathing was shaky, his cheeks wet with tears, but at least he was no longer frozen in fear. He had found safety in the arms of someone who refused to let go. Not long after, the distant sound of sirens cut through the quiet air. Louder and louder they grew until flashing lights filled the street. Police cars pulled up quickly, their presence bringing with them a sense of relief. Officers stepped out, moving cautiously but with confidence, scanning the area and calling out for people to stay calm. The driver let out a long, shaky breath. He whispered softly to the boy, "It's okay now. Help is here. You're safe." The boy looked up at him, his eyes red but filled with gratitude. He didn't say much, only nodded and clung tighter for a moment, as if afraid to let go too soon. When the officers spotted them crouched behind the fence, they rushed over, urging them to stay calm. The driver stood slowly, keeping the boy's small hand in his own. He explained quickly that the child had been out in the open and that he had stepped in to protect him. The officers nodded with respect, guiding them toward a safer area where more neighbors had gathered, and then, almost as suddenly as it had all started, the boy's parents appeared. They had been frantically searching, running from one end of the street to the other, calling out their son's name with desperation in their voices. When they finally saw him alive, unharmed, standing beside the stranger who had kept him safe, they broke down in tears. The mother rushed forward first, scooping her son into her arms, holding him so tightly it looked as though she would never let him go again. The boy buried his face against her, his small arms wrapping around her neck. His father followed, placing a trembling hand on the boy's back, his face filled with both relief and disbelief. The parents turned to the driver, their eyes wet with tears. For a moment, no words came out. How do you thank someone for saving your child's life? Finally, the mother whispered through her sobs, "Thank you. Thank you for protecting him." The father added with a shaky voice, "We will never forget what you did for our family." The driver, humbled, shook his head gently. "I just did what anyone should do," he said softly. But deep down, he knew not everyone would have stepped forward the way he did. Many had chosen to hide, many had looked away, but in that critical moment, he had made the choice to act. As the boy stayed close to his parents, still holding tightly to his mother's hand, the driver felt a wave of emotion wash over him. His body was still shaking from the adrenaline, but now, standing in the presence of a family reunited, he felt a deep sense of peace. He hadn't set out to be anyone's hero that day. He had simply been doing his job. And yet, in the blink of an eye, fate had given him a chance to be part of something far bigger than himself. Neighbors began to step out now, slowly gathering in small groups, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some pointed toward the driver, their voices filled with awe. "That's the man who saved the boy," one said. "He didn't even think twice. He just ran straight to him," another added. The driver, however, didn't seek the attention. He didn't see himself as special. He was just grateful the child was safe, grateful that a tragedy had been prevented. All he wanted in that moment was to go home to his own family, hug his children, and hold them a little closer. The officers finished their checks, ensuring the street was secure and that everyone was accounted for. They too gave the driver a nod of respect, one even saying quietly, "You did a brave thing today. You kept that boy alive." The driver gave a small smile, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. He looked back at the boy one last time. The child, standing safely between his parents, lifted his head and gave him the tiniest smile, soft, shy, but filled with meaning. It was a silent way of saying thank you, a thank you that would stay with the driver forever. As the flashing lights dimmed and the street began to return to normal, the driver walked back to his car. The food delivery he had been carrying still sat forgotten on the ground. He picked it up, dusted off the bag, and let out a tired laugh. The delivery was probably late by now, but in that moment, he didn't care. He knew he had already delivered something far more important than a meal. He had delivered safety, hope, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow for one child and his family. And though the day had shaken him to his core, he drove away knowing that sometimes life gives you moments that define who you truly are. And in this moment, he had chosen courage. The following days felt almost unreal. What had started as an ordinary delivery had now turned into a story that people across the city, and soon, the nation, couldn't stop talking about. At first, it was just the neighbors. They spoke about it with hushed voices, telling each other how the delivery driver had risked himself to protect a boy he didn't even know. They described the way he had run toward the child when everyone else was running away, the way he had shielded him with nothing but his own body. For the people who had seen it with their own eyes, it was an image they would never forget. Soon, local news stations picked up the story. Reporters came to the neighborhood, speaking to residents, officers, and the boy's family. The story spread quickly. A delivery driver saves a child during a terrifying moment, showing courage that moved everyone around him. The words traveled faster than anyone expected, reaching people far beyond that street, far beyond the city. Within a few days, the driver's face appeared on television screens and news articles. Headlines called him the everyday hero, the man who didn't look away, and the driver who delivered hope. But when reporters tried to interview him, he remained humble. "I didn't do anything special," he would say quietly. "I just did what I thought was right. That boy needed help, and I couldn't walk away." For the boy's family, though, his actions were more than just doing what was right. To them, he had given back what could never be replaced, their child's life and safety. The mother often said, with tears in her eyes, "He's more than a hero. He's part of our family now." The father added, "There are no words big enough to thank someone who saves your child." The boy himself was still quiet, still trying to process what had happened. But whenever he saw the driver afterward, his face lit up. He would run into his arms without hesitation, clinging to him with the kind of trust that only comes from knowing someone has stood between you and danger. It was a bond created in a single moment, but one that would last forever. What made the story so powerful was how ordinary the driver was. He wasn't famous, he wasn't rich, he wasn't someone with a title or a badge. He was simply a man working hard to provide for his family, a man who woke up that morning expecting nothing more than a day of deliveries. And yet, in the middle of the unexpected, he became living proof that real heroes can be found in the most ordinary places. Communities everywhere felt inspired. Schools shared the story with students, teaching them about bravery and kindness. Churches and community groups spoke about it during gatherings, reminding people that courage comes in many forms. Social media was filled with messages of gratitude and admiration. People wrote, "This story gives me hope in humanity, and we need more people like him in this world." Some even started calling for him to be officially honored. "He deserves recognition," one neighbor said. "He didn't just save a boy, he reminded all of us that goodness still exists." But the driver never asked for recognition. When asked about it, he would simply smile and say, "I didn't do it for attention. I did it because he was just a kid, and kids deserve to be safe." Those words touched people just as deeply as his actions. As time went on, the boy and his family often visited the driver. They would bring food, share laughs, and spend evenings together. What had begun as a single act of courage had turned into a lasting friendship. The boy now had someone new in his life to look up to, someone who showed him that even strangers could become protectors. Even delivery drivers could become heroes. One evening, months after the event, the boy's parents invited the driver to a small community gathering. Neighbors filled the room, clapping and cheering as he walked in. On the stage, the boy stood with his parents, holding a small framed picture of himself with the driver on the day they first met. With a shaky voice, the boy said, "This man saved me. I was so scared, but he told me I wasn't alone." I'll never forget that. The room filled with emotion. Some cried, some applauded, but everyone felt the weight of those words. The driver, moved to tears himself, hugged the boy tightly, whispering once more, "You'll never be alone." "Not while I'm here." That story, told and retold, reached millions. It wasn't just about fear or danger, or even the act of saving a life. It was about compassion. It was about how, in the darkest moments, someone can step forward and remind us of the power of human kindness. The delivery driver didn't just deliver meals that day. He delivered hope. He delivered courage. He delivered proof that, no matter how divided or uncertain the world may feel, one person's decision to act with love can ripple out and touch an entire nation. And for the boy, now safe in the arms of his family, that day became more than just a memory of fear. It became the day he learned that heroes don't always wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes they come in the form of an ordinary person, in an ordinary car, carrying a simple bag of food ready to do something extraordinary when it matters most.